from the process and talk about what's actually going to happen on the field. Of those 8 teams that did not get buys, that are playing in this first round, I'll ask each of you, which of them do you think is most likely to win 4 in a row and win the national championship on January 20th? Let's start with you, Paul.
Yeah, I think Texas is probably best positioned because they got a good draw at number one. They ended up with a very pedestrian Clemson team. They lost their biggest rivalry game of the year on the final Saturday, and because Miami couldn't handle going to Syracuse, they backed into the championship game, and then they win it on a 56-yard field goal. So, but I don't think they're a match. I think the other team that is intriguing is Ohio State. Talk about meaningful games. What we were talking about a minute ago, that rivalry with Michigan was so irrelevant because of the 12-team playoff that we nearly had.
It was still relevant, Paul. Everyone is still.
Let me finish my point. Hold on, Nicole.
Okay.
I was trying to say it was so irrelevant that we nearly had a riot after the game. That was my point. Not that it's irrelevant.
Okay, I agree with you.
It's incredibly relevant.
Is it relevant?
We've never seen anything quite like that. That's why it was so important to the people of Ohio State and Michigan. So I'll cede my time to Nicole.
Were they actually better off losing that game in terms of the way things played out?
I don't think so. I don't think so, considering that there's only one more miscue available for Ryan Day. So I would have, in a perfect world, rather have won that game because just to further my point a minute ago, nothing means more than that. I don't live in that area, but I think that game would rival a national championship for Ryan Day.
I think that this is the time for Ohio State to be national championship or bust, right? We talked about that all season long, and here it is. But they're also going to do this in a stadium where it might be filled with Vols fans, right? Because people are so down after the loss to Michigan. It's going to be really interesting, I think, for that first round game.
I think Ohio State's the answer here. Ohio State has the talent roster to make the run. Let's also understand there is a possibility that if they're going to rattle this thing off, they got to go through Tennessee, Oregon, Texas, and Georgia, which is a stretch that is ungodly for anyone to go through at any point in this sport. But since Texas got taken and since Ohio State got taken, Jeremy, let me just toss Penn State out there. Penn State got a pretty favorable draw here as well as the 6th seed. Penn State just lost to Oregon. Very interestingly, in the second half of that Big Ten championship game as they lost, I thought their offense came alive like we have not seen it come alive before. They had a couple of 100-yard rushers. This is against Oregon, mind you. Drew Aller threw the ball as well as he's thrown it all year. Tyler Warren was top 10 in the Heisman conversation. They had some receivers step up. They got a really hellacious pass rush. And so if that team gets loose and finds itself the way people are talking about Tennessee finding itself and being dangerous, I think Penn State could be dangerous given the draw they have. And remember, they're in the side of the bracket where a Georgia team may be without its starting quarterback, and they get SMU and Boise as the first two leading up to that hypothetical game. So I'm going to say Penn State, and if they get eliminated first round, just delete the footage.
Well, and I'm fascinated by Notre Dame. I think the nation checked out on Notre Dame after they lost to Northern Illinois. And the reality is Notre Dame's schedule is what it is. They got this de facto kind of, we kind of live in your backyard ACC agreement. But because of that, they're never going to receive a first-round bye, the way that this is set up currently. So they're always going to have to start. But the fact that they start this thing off at home against Indiana, and Jeremy, I'm a nerd about these things. The only time Indiana beat Notre Dame in South Bend, the first time they ever played, November of 1898. So revenge game for Notre Dame, right? No, but they've never played. Like they used to play regularly in the 30s and the 40s, but they've not played. I think they played once since 1958. That was in 1991. So Notre Dame, because I believe Georgia is flawed. What is Georgia's situation with the quarterback? All of these teams are flawed. Quinn Ewers at Texas, he either looks really, really good or it's Wolf. And so Notre Dame is a team no one's talking about, and they haven't talked about them since that Northern Illinois loss, but there they sit, and there might be an opportunity there for them to get on a run that literally no one's talking about them. I've heard everyone talk about everyone but them, and that includes Indiana, who's going to Notre Dame.
Okay, Ryan, I have been talking about Notre Dame because I am totally with you. I don't think people watched them play over the last 2 months of the season. They were one of the most dominant and consistent teams in the country. Notre Dame has an elite defense, and they have a great run game. Now, we don't know if the pass game is good enough to get them to a national championship game, or what happens if they're down 2 touchdowns and Riley Leonard has to throw it. But to be elite in 2 phases, I think is more than some of the other teams we're talking about when we've got a lot more questions or a lot more inconsistency. So I'm with you, Ryan.
All right, just quickly, Georgia, if Beck can't play, if it's Stockton instead, how does that change things or not change things, Josh?
I have got a very interesting theory on Georgia. I rattled my magic 8 ball, and it came up Georgia. I ended up picking them to win the whole thing. And I am baking in them playing with a backup quarterback, winning the whole thing. There's a strange sort of phenomenon that happens at the college level that doesn't happen so much at the NFL level. If you lose your quarterback at the Sunday level, you're probably done. 9 times out of 10, you're done. At the college level, sometimes that's true. But at Georgia, Carson Beck was already a very turnover-prone player this year. Just the cumulative sum of the parts there was good enough to where Georgia made it through. But sometimes when you have an ultra-talented locker room that has bought into the culture, and they have at Georgia, for better or for worse, whatever you think that means, and you see your number one go down, there is a galvanization that happens amongst guys like that. That's a very prideful group of defensive players, by the way. And there's a galvanization that happens where the actual aggregate of the output raises equal to or maybe even surpasses the level of performance that you would have gotten with your starter in there. And it leaves people looking and wondering, how are they doing this with the backup quarterback? One of my favorite things to do in college for a long time has been see a backup quarterback go down. That's not what I love. What I love is watching the overreaction in the betting market and just blindly betting the team having to play their backup quarterback. So I'm taking that to the extreme right now. I'm actually going to pick Georgia to win the whole thing. Again, same rule applies. If they get eliminated by Notre Dame, just burn the tape.
McGee?
Yeah, well, I saw it firsthand in the SEC championship game down on the sideline, for our ESPN. We did this alt-cast. And the energy on that sideline, the rest of the stadium, right? These Georgia fans that have had this house of horrors at Mercedes-Benz Stadium, lost 7 conference championship games down there. When their starter goes down, the dread in the stands was completely countered by the reaction on the Georgia sideline. They love Gunnar Stockton. And then for him to lead them straight down the field and score, and in the middle of that drive, put a shoulder down and knock down a safety, it was, you could feel it. And talking to the players after the game, they all said, listen, y'all don't know who he is. That's our guy. He played safety on the scout team on defense for a while. Like, the defensive guys love him. So I'm with Josh. I think there was an energy infusion, and this is not a knock on Beck at all, but there was an absolute increase in energy and certainly no lack of confidence. So it'll be interesting to see. Sometimes when the star goes down, the rest of the team plays better. And I think you certainly saw that, Georgia beating Texas again in that SEC championship game.